everybody. This is LA Crow from Bracket Busters. This is our first episode of any type of media. We are thinking about kind of tiptoeing our way in here to maybe some YouTube videos, some podcasts, maybe some interviews with coaches, players from different mid majors around the country. We're kind of just seeing where this goes, and I thought I'd kind of take this first episode to talk about something that's been pretty top of mind for a lot of mid major fans out there, and that's whether or not we could potentially see a Mountain West conference that has six bids this season in March Madness. And I think that a lot of you that kind of follow along mid-major basketball probably said that you were surprised by the level of talent that has been within the Mountain West this year. Mountain West historically is a very good conference. You've had some runs from Colorado State, New Mexico, obviously, before their home court is historic, and San Diego State, of course, had their Final Four run last year in March Madness. So, I think it's something that's like Mountain West is always there, but like it's not always necessarily one of the most sought out conferences that a lot of people are obviously talking about. I think it's always just kind of like hiding in the background, ready to sneak in whenever March Madness comes around. And in fact, I think the same thing can be said this year. I think for myself, even looking into the conference ahead of the season, I think I didn't really think we'd be talking about a potential six bid Mountain West conference here in January. And again, I think it's a little bit hard talking about this stuff in January. I mean, we're still 2 months away from Selection Sunday. Realistically, it's college basketball. A lot of things can happen in between now and then. But I do think that like it's worth talking about because I think at this point in the season, it's been so good that we can have this conversation. So I think it's like super important to cover this stuff, and it's been something a lot of people have been talking about. So I think it's a great first topic for us here. So this morning, whenever I was going out and I was starting to like look at like net rankings and Ken Palm of all these Mountain West schools, I think it really speaks for itself. I think as of January 18th this morning, we looked at net rankings, and San Diego State was at 20, Colorado State at 22, Utah State at 24, New Mexico at 28, Nevada 45, Boise State 54. So if we look at the Ken Palm, on the other hand, we had San Diego State at 21, Colorado State at 29, Utah State at 41, New Mexico at 31, Nevada at 47, and Boise State at 56. So, I think when we're talking about this, those are the six teams that we're really like most realistically going to see if the Mountain West is to have a six-team bid come March. And when you look at the net rankings, the Ken Palm, it's all pretty similar. The only outlier here is kind of Utah State a little bit. Utah State is ranked right now at 24 in the net rankings and 41 in the Ken Palm. But when you look at the Ken Palm, a lot of it has to do with Ken Palm just hated their schedule. Their strength of schedule was significantly lower than the other five schools, and they also do not care for their adjusted defensive efficiency. So you can look at the Ken Palm and say like, okay, I guess their computer metrics, like don't look that great compared to the other schools, but like realistically, they're up there. There's a reason their net rankings are at 24, and we're comparing it, and they're ranked right now. So, realistically, I think you can kind of take Ken Palm's ranking maybe and look at it like a grain of salt a little bit here. So, I think like looking at it on the surface, it's kind of taking a step back here. We're probably looking at a 5-bid league, honestly, and that's if everything kind of keeps up the way they are right now. And I think a big reason for that is a school called UNLV. UNLV is currently ranked at 83 in the net ranking and 78 in the Ken Palm. So, I think kind of looking at it now, you're like, oh, well, why is that causing a problem? I think it's because the Mountain West can have the ability to cannibalize itself. So UNLV's already knocked off New Mexico and Boise State. So they're a good team. They even probably, I would say, have a chance to maybe take Boise State's spot here. Like, they're going to have to go on an absolute heck of a run for the rest of conference play to be in that contention. And, you're probably going to have to beat schools like San Diego State, Colorado State to really continue to add to that net ranking and that Ken Palm ranking. But I do think that, like, it's definitely possible because realistically, they're, 30 spots behind Boise State, which sounds like a lot. But in today's day of college basketball, if you look at the net rankings, let's say they blow out San Diego State on accident sometime and they win by 20, that's going to significantly help their net ranking. So I think it's really possible that like they could swap in there, but that's the main problem with this league is it's almost too good. It's almost too competitive because every night one of these teams is probably going to knock off one of the other teams. So, Colorado State's going to beat San Diego State, or Utah State's going to beat New Mexico, and New Mexico's going to beat Nevada, and vice versa. And then we're going to just have this entire circle of all of these really good teams, which is great because honestly, it does help the computer metrics. But when you're looking at it from a 6-team bid, it's probably gonna be very difficult to do that because you're winning and you're beating one of those other teams game in, game out. So, Boise State's going to take a loss, and then all of a sudden their metrics are going to go down lower, and then they're going to be completely out of conversation. Or the same thing with New Mexico, which are both teams that kind of have snuck into the picture just as of the last few weeks here. So, I think it's definitely possible. And honestly, that's kind of why I like looking at a lot of these other bracketologists. There's three in particular I've kind of been following a little bit more closely on Twitter. And then the websites overall, they update it very frequently, and I'm honestly impressed by the accuracy of some of the bracketologists. So let's kind of like dive in a little bit here to where they're at in terms of like a potential 6-bid league among these three that I picked out here. Number one I've picked out is Bracket Dom. I'm just going to kind of run through each of the three, and then we can kind of take a step back here and look at them comparatively. So for Bracket Dom, he's got San Diego State at the 5 seed, Colorado State at the 5 seed, Utah State at the 6 seed, New Mexico as the first 4 out, Nevada as a 9 seed, and Boise State as an 11 seed, last 4 in. JBR Bracketology has San Diego State at the 6 seed, Colorado State at the 7 seed, Utah State at the 5 seed, New Mexico as the first 4 out as well, Nevada as the 10 seed, and Boise State as the 11 seed, last 4 in. And last but not least, T3 Bracketology has San Diego State as a 6 seed, Colorado State as the 5 seed, Utah State as the 6 seed, New Mexico as the first 4 out, Nevada as the 8 seed, and Boise State as the 11 seed. So if we look at those three, they're all pretty similar. I think it's like a consensus that as of right now, as of January 18th, 2024, the Mountain West is a 5-bid league. I think there's no doubt about that. The computer metrics back that up. And so far, 4 or 5 games into conference play, it backs it up. So I think, obviously, the common denominator here is New Mexico is the first 4 out. I think they have a great chance to hop in on that. I mean, they're really close. We're saying they're, the next 4 teams out. So, you beat another school, you beat San Diego State, Colorado State, Utah State, they can kind of take that loss. New Mexico hops in that picture very easily. And I think, again, kind of coming back to where I was talking about, it's such a competitive league that I think it actually kind of hurts itself in a sense to talk about this as a 6-bid league. New Mexico can try to beat one of those top 3 teams, and the top 3 teams are going to be fine. You don't want New Mexico probably beating Boise State, because then Boise State's probably going to be first 4 out, or whatever it is, like the first 8 out. So you don't want that to happen. You want New Mexico to beat one of the teams that can like take that loss a little bit if you really want it. If you want to value the league having 6 teams rather than necessarily having a 5 seed or a 6 seed, because realistically, if you do beat San Diego State or Colorado State, they're probably not going to have that high of a seed anymore. You're probably going to bump them down. San Diego State's a 6 originally. You're going to bump them down. Maybe who knows? Maybe they stay at a 6. Colorado State, I think, definitely is taking a few more losses. So, like, let's say you have them at a 6 seed, they take a loss like that. You're probably looking at a 7 seed for them. And again, I'm not a bracketologist. These people are far more knowledgeable than I am about this kind of stuff. I'm more of like an analysis guy and look at it from the surface of things. So that's why I depend on them to kind of go and take through the metrics, and they're the ones that come out. And there's a reason why these bracketologists take a lot of pride in saying, I had 98% accuracy, I had 99% accuracy last year. So really, I take a lot of what they say to heart about what I want to explain to you all in articles and posts. So that's why I kind of think that, looking at it from, kind of a bird's eye view here, it's going to sound dumb, but realistically, the thing you have to do to have a 6-bid league here is not lose games you don't want to lose. San Jose State, Air Force, Wyoming, Fresno State, you can't afford to take a loss to those teams, especially not a team like Air Force that's like, very bottom of the net rankings at KenPom. You just absolutely cannot afford to take those losses. And I know like that everybody's going to be like, oh, well, duh, you don't want to take those losses. Well, this league's so competitive that these are all very good mid-majors, and those 4 teams I just named would win games in lower mid-major conferences. So, like, there's no doubt that these are competitive teams that can absolutely win, and that's from college basketball sometimes, is the fact that, like, any team can win at any point in time. I mean, Presbyterian was 5-27 last year, and they went out and beat Vanderbilt early in the season. I mean, these teams can beat anybody. So, like, realistically, you don't want to take those losses. And that's what's going to really be the nail in the coffin. Because let's say New Mexico, messes around and loses to one of those 4 teams, they're out. They're probably done unless they win quite literally the rest of their conference games. Same thing with Boise State. especially UNLV. I know I mentioned like who knows, maybe they have an outlier chance here. If you lose one of those games, you're done. Like it's just going to be a complete nail in the coffin. So that's why I kind of am taking the whole 6 bid league here conversation about like a little bit as a grain of salt because it's going to be very difficult. There's a lot of time left in conference. You know, we're talking we have at least a month and a half games left before conference tournament starts. So that's a lot of basketball to play, and I think it's like something that we need to almost take as like a 2 week increment at a time here to kind of analyze whether or not this is still potentially a dream. But I think as of right now, you're absolutely correct. But kind of going back to my point about UNLV, because I think something that's interesting here is this league is so good that you got to look at like the quad one, quad two losses, right? Or quad one, quad two wins. Let's say UNLV, beat San Diego State, like I mentioned earlier. That's quad one win. Same thing with Colorado State. So yeah, you take a quad one loss on those other two teams, like if you beat them. But I think in the long run, again, it kind of comes back to do you want to favor higher seeding or do you want to favor having 6 teams in the conference in March Madness? Same thing can be said about New Mexico. Again, it comes back to like they knock off one of those teams they're in for sure, unless it's Boise State. And then even if it is Boise State, you're probably looking at like a swap of like Boise State going to the first four out, New Mexico going into the tournament. So definitely some potential there. And again, it kind of comes back to there's a lot of games to be played. We're talking about this on January 18th. March Madness isn't for another 2 months. So, we got a lot of time here. But let's take a look at what the rest of the schedule looks like for these teams in January. And then I think we can kind of decide whether or not, like, how realistic is this really? And then kind of come to a consensus about, like, what's the potential here that we're actually talking? Like, is this going to be feasible, 4, 6, 8 weeks down the road? And whether or not it's actually possible. So if we look at San Diego State, the rest of this month they have Boise State, Wyoming, Colorado State. Pretty much, this is my projection of what each of these 6 teams need to do. I by no means, again, am a statistical analyst of any sort of bracketologist when I say this. So this is just me completely talking about what I think would make sense in terms of when I look at the net rankings at KenPom. What would affect them the most and what can teams afford to lose, what can teams afford to gain in order to actually make this possible. So if we look at San Diego State, you have Boise State, Wyoming, Colorado State. Personally, I think you take a loss to Boise State. That bumps Boise State's rankings up higher. So probably makes sense to like take that loss because again, it kind of comes back to the UNLV point or New Mexico point where it's like, great, you knock off one of those teams that can afford to take that loss. And then you move up higher. San Diego State maybe moves down, whatever, 1 seed, but that's okay because we have 6 teams in there. And then Wyoming, Colorado State, I think you take a win at each of those because when I get to Colorado State's point, it'll kind of make sense in terms of San Diego State wanting to win over them. And then Wyoming's just, again, one of those bottom 4 teams that you're going to want to win. So looking at Colorado State, you have UNLV, Nevada, Wyoming, and San Diego State. So I mentioned a loss to San Diego State because I have them beating UNLV. You're going to want to win that game. I have them beating Wyoming. You're going to want to win that game. And I think in terms of like looking at the Mountain West as a whole, you're going to want to take that loss to San Diego State. You're also going to want to take a loss in Nevada. I know that sounds bad, but if Colorado State takes both those losses, they're still in the tournament. There's no doubt about that. They can afford to take that loss. They might be a lower seed, but I think like from the rationale of it, it's okay to take those 2 losses. It's a really good conference. You're going to take good losses. Looking at Utah State, we have Fresno State, Boise State, San Jose State. They have to go 2-1 here. I have, again, trying to boost this resume up here. I have them losing to Boise State. I think Boise State really needs to pull out some serious wins in order to stay in this conversation. But then, obviously, I have Utah State beating Fresno State. Also have Utah State beating San Jose State. You lose either one of those games, and I think we're having a different conversation in a few weeks. But anyway, regardless, let's move on to New Mexico. They play Air Force, San Jose State, Nevada, and Boise State. So I have them quite literally winning all 4 of those games. If we want to have a serious conversation about whether or not we want to do this thing as a 6-bid league, you have to beat Air Force. You have to beat San Jose State. Those are like non-exceptions. You probably have to beat Nevada. And I know like it probably sounds bad to have Nevada taking 2 losses here, but I'll explain the rest of the schedule, in my opinion, what I have. Anyway, so on Air Force, on New Mexico, you got to beat Air Force, got to beat San Jose State, and you got to probably beat Boise State. And the reason is you want Boise State and New Mexico to stay at kind of the same level. So if you want to talk about them being the first 4 team in, You want it to be last four in. You want to be whether it's at 11 seed, kind of wherever you want it to be. You want them to be about the same level of play. So it's you kind of probably need them to split the season, and you want them to be about the same level of wins in terms of caliber of wins. You pretty much want them to be literally the same team because that's probably their level of talent. So you're going to want both of them to try to beat each other, beat the same level of teams. That way you can stay at that same ranking level. Looking at Nevada, we have them winning at Wyoming, winning at Colorado State, and losing at New Mexico. I just kind of explained my rationale for losing at New Mexico. But for Wyoming, again, one of those bottom four teams that you absolutely have to win. And Colorado State, the reason I have them winning that game is because I kind of expected the point. Colorado State can afford to take that loss, and Nevada needs that win in order to secure themselves a little bit higher to give them a little bit more of a room, to grow in the rest of the conference. Because let's say it gets to February and Nevada takes a bad loss to someone, a win at Colorado State will be a fantastic resume booster comparatively to losing a bad game. I mean, unless you lose at Colorado State, because Nevada's already taken a couple losses in conference, so all of a sudden you're having a different conversation if they lose an accidental game somewhere that they could be out if that was to happen. So yeah, you kind of need that win, and Colorado State can afford to take that loss, in my opinion, at least. Maybe some bracketologists would disagree with that, but I think that makes sense here. Looking at Boise State, I need them and New Mexico to really go on a heck of a run here. So I've got Boise State beating San Diego State, Fresno State, Utah State, and losing to New Mexico. I brought up the point earlier. San Diego State can afford to take a loss, so let's have Boise State beat them. Fresno State, you got to win that game. And Utah State, if Boise State can go out and beat San Diego State and Utah State, we might be talking about them at a much higher seed. But I think, again, this helps bolster everybody's resume if Boise State continues to go on this run. I have them losing New Mexico because I think, again, if Boise State's able to pull off this, completely hypothetical situation, that's going to be an incredible win for New Mexico. So really, all of a sudden then, it comes back to the point, you're legitimately looking at a 6-bid league coming into February, if this is all to actually come true and happen. Again, this is big hypotheticals. This is completely just me spitballing out here, but this is my opinion, what I think they would need to do. So, coming from a consensus, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Mountain West to have 6 teams come March Madness. Quite frankly, I don't know if it's actually possible. I think we're all talking about these hypotheticals as of January 18, 2024. I think Matt Norlander and Gary Parrish were talking about this one time on their podcast, and it's hard to talk brackets in January. Valentine's Day on, you can kind of start talking about those things, I think, a little bit more concrete. So I think it's a fun talking point right now. I don't think it's realistic because Fresno State, Wyoming, Air Force, they're not going to lose every single game. It's not possible. They're going to beat a higher end school. It's going to happen. It's college basketball. It happens every single season. So there is no way all those teams, those bottom 4 teams, are all going to be that bad to the point that they are not going to win a game against some of these higher schools. So what's going to happen is they're going to beat a higher school. They're going to beat a New Mexico. They're going to beat a Boise State, or UNLV is going to come in and wreck some people's problems and create some problems. So there's just too many what ifs, I think, to say confidently this is a 6-bid league, because we know how the committee votes every single year. I don't disagree with where the seedings are currently right now, but we know that there's going to be some big schools that's going to beat up some small schools, and some of these Power 5 schools or Power 5 conferences, they're going to take those last spots. Happens every year. So, I think, again, it's kind of a fun thing to talk about right now, but I think realistically we're probably looking at a 5-bid Mountain West conference, probably 5-bid league. I think if everything goes right, everything falls perfectly in line, you're probably looking at 6. But I think that, again, this comes back to it's going to be extremely difficult. I think it's going to be nearly impossible. So, thank you for tagging in and listening to this first episode. I hope you enjoyed this content. I think we have some more stuff planned. I'm going to kind of just see where this goes a little bit. But, if you like this content, feel free to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I think we're just, again, going to kind of see where this goes. And, if you have any suggestions or, anything you'd like us to cover in our Substack or not. So, again, actually, if you're, tagging in from YouTube, or any one of these other sources that we're going to post this to. We mostly run this as a Substack. So if you're not familiar with what Substack is, it is an email newsletter. But also, you don't have to subscribe. If you don't want the emails, you can just kind of tag along to the website. You can absolutely log in. We post all of our content for free, not doing a paid wall. Definitely not doing a paid wall anytime soon. So if you like this kind of content, if you love college basketball, you love mid majors, go out there. We post that. We post the top 25 ranking every single week. So if you would love to sign up for that, I'd love to see your name out there pop up as a new free subscriber. And definitely hit that like button and help us out here. So if you have any friends that live mid majors, definitely shout us out. And we'll catch you on Twitter, catch you on Substack, and thank you and see y'all later.